under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes, sir. Sunday Black. Present. Jeffrey Green.
Here.
William Colo. Charlie Pagano.
Present.
William Bizzuto.
Present.
Roberta Rodriguez Jr.
Here.
Michael Salvio.
Here.
Joyce Templeton. 8 present.
Thank you. First order of business, Attorney Casagrande would like to address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. I just have a few housekeeping items, and we'll get right to Dr. Morrison's revised plan. The first thing I'd like to submit are the waivers signed by the members of the commission for tonight's meeting and for next week's meeting. This is a waiver of service by a marshal. They don't need to have exhibit numbers. I'd just like to have them submitted for the record. So I'll give those to the marshal to hand up. Thank you. The next thing I'd like to submit is the commission will recall that at its meeting of last Thursday night, you directed us to continue our outreach efforts to make sure that people were aware of last week's meeting and to make them aware that Dr. Morrison was going to be revising his plan. And we did that. I sent a letter out to all of the people who signed in at the last meeting, as well as all of the people that Mr. Pagano sent out his letter to back in late December. That went out, and what I'm attaching, or there's a cover letter to what I've done is written a letter to Mr. Pagano saying, here is a sample of all the letters that we sent out, and here's the list of the names and addresses. So we didn't inundate you with 50 letters. So I want to hand 1 plus 8 up to the record, of those into the record. The next thing I'd like to submit is, you'll remember the last time we entered into the record exhibits from the submissions that had been submitted to the website as of the afternoon of the last meeting. Since we prepared those website submissions, which were entitled website exhibits 1 through 7, we did receive an additional website comment from Ms. Lynette Piombo, I hope I have that pronounced correctly, at 4:22 p.m. on Thursday. So I'd like to submit this into the record as Exhibit WS8, okay? And I'll hand up 1 plus 8. The next exhibit, it was actually entered as an exhibit number at the last meeting. It was exhibit number 7. And you'll recall that you requested me to get for you and to submit into the record tonight as exhibit 7 a copy of the State Assembly District map, the most current State Assembly District map. So I'm handing up through the Marshal 1 plus 8 copies of that map. The next exhibit I'd like to enter into the record as Exhibit 10. This is an 11 by 17 copy of the draft plan. It's called Draft Plan 2 that Dr. Morrison has prepared, and he'll be speaking to you about tonight. Just for the record, out in the lobby, you'll have large wall copies of this plan, Draft Plan 2, plus another Draft Plan 2 that shows the neighborhood boundaries. This one does not, but I just want to submit this, and I only have one copy of this for the record. So this would be Exhibit 10. The next exhibit, and I have copies not only for the commission, but I've got about 30 extra copies for members of the public, is an 8.5 by 11 copy of Draft Plan number 2. Again, this is the plan that Dr. Morrison will be discussing tonight. And what I'll do is these extra copies, I'll leave them with my associate, Peter Harrison, and if anybody wants to get extra copies, if they could just go up and Peter and give everybody an extra copy. Or he can go around the room and hand out copies. And the next exhibit, which I'd like to enter as Exhibit 12, is an 8.5 by 14 copy of draft proposal number 2, but this is showing the neighborhood boundaries. And again, I will hand up 8 plus 1 for the commission. But I also have brought about 30 or 35 extra copies of that as well, which I'll give to my associate, and anyone who would like that, we can hand those out. And the last thing, Mr. Chairman, before I turn it over to Dr. Morrison, is just I'd like to enter into the record hard copies of the PowerPoint presentation that he will be giving tonight, where he discusses the draft plan and how he came about it. So I'm going to hand up 8 plus 1 of those. And I believe we also have several extra copies of Dr. Morrison's PowerPoint for members of the public, and I'll give those to Mr. Harrison, and he can hand those out to those of you who would like to see it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I conclude my remarks, and I would ask Dr. Morrison to address the commission.
Thank you very much. Dr. Morrison, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Pagano and commission members. Tonight I'm going to update you on my progress over the past 6 days, including Saturday, Sunday, days and nights, in transitioning to the new districting system, the new set of districts. And I want to acknowledge your frustration in not receiving the plans until mid-afternoon. We had just 6 days to do this. Normally, this is something that is not compressed into 6 days, but it goes for a couple of weeks before you have another set of plans, another set of revisions. And I was the one who was responsible for the delay because I insisted on, I wanted to have a look at it to make sure we weren't handing out something that was, oh, we got that wrong, we're going to have to redo it. So what you got is a draft plan, two draft plans where the numbers are correct, and there's still some fine tuning, which I'll point out to you. It's my understanding that you wanted me to touch base with a number of people, and that also you were responding to what I heard as a pretty clear consensus last week, that the public wanted me to move in a different direction, starting with Mr. Butler's concepts and an actual plan that he gave me, and try to go in that direction. So that's what I've done. And just to report back to you what I have done, I find that when I try to contact people in the city, they actually pick up the phone, so I was successful. I have a 100% success rate. I spoke with both the Democratic registrar and the Republican registrar, Tim DiCarlo, the Republican Patricia Mulhale. I spoke with City Clerk Michael Dalton and Town Clerk Chick Spinelli, and I really got a lot of useful information from them, and again, it was kind of corroborating what I heard from the people who spoke at the mic last week. I also reached out to two other people on my own. I reached out to Richard Wood, who I assume as I think he's the executive director or something with the NAACP. He certainly speaks for one segment of the African American community, if not more broadly for all African Americans in this city. And I also reached out to Ruben Rodriguez. Both of these individuals were here last week, and they spoke at the mic, and I asked them about two matters. One was whether it was true that this is a city that has elected in the past both blacks and Hispanics as aldermen, and the answer was, to the best of their knowledge, yes. And I also wanted to just sound them out about what they thought about something I knew nothing about, was whether blacks and Hispanics in the city ever form coalitions when they vote, and they said, yeah, they do sometimes. So that clarified an important point for me, which I'll return to at the end of my presentation. So what we're going to do tonight is just an outline of what I'm going to do. I'm going to review those key measures and concepts again and how they're implemented, just because I think there are going to be some people in the audience tonight who weren't here last week. I'm then going to show you Mr. Butler's original plan, which was basically a map with some boundaries, but not any streets on it. But I was able to approximate that very, very closely. I think I got it exactly. And I want to show you the important aspects of it now, which are the demographic parameters. And it was my understanding that Mr. Butler's intent in offering you all this plan was that it should be used as a point of departure. The point of departure being that we want a primary emphasis in this process on the traditional neighborhoods, and that he intended that I should analyze it and maintain faith to that primary purpose, and then offer up both the demographic statistics on the plan as he gave it to me, and then also I felt obliged to say, well, your plan, there's some room for improvement. And the improvements that I was able to make on them were, I'll get to them in a moment, but they were all in positive directions, two positive directions, one of which was, my primary purpose was to say, well, I think I can boost the minority shares slightly, but I don't know how much, but I was able to figure out how much. And secondly, in the process of boosting the minority shares for both blacks and Hispanics, I was able to do it by jiggering around neighborhoods. And I was, in fact, able to resolve what I think he had left unresolved for someone to do if they ever wanted to go forward with this, which was some of his plan had some neighborhoods split unnecessarily, such that if I unified them, I not only unified them, but I got maybe a tenth of a percentage point boost in one or another of the minority shares. So we're moving everything in the right direction. The train's moving in the right direction on all counts, and the pedigree is certainly Mr. Butler's, but it is now my plan. Nobody told me how to do it. I did it, and I kind of like it. And I'll tell you why at the end. I like it not only because it accomplishes what you want, but because I think if I were ever to testify in court and some Justice Department lawyers were saying, well, why did you do it this way? I think I've got a pretty compelling case, and I'll let Mr. Casagrande comment on that if he wants to, or if you have any questions. So anyhow, this is what we're going to go over. Mr. Butler's original plan, the plan that I did, which is my draft proposal number 2, I had originally envisioned 2 versions of this. One where I said I tried really hard for the Hispanics, and then I tried really hard for the blacks, and I came up with 2 different plans. The answer was it didn't happen that way. There's only one way to do it. And I'm now at a point where if I gave either group another 1/10 of a percentage point in terms of increasing its share, it has the effect of drastically reducing the other group's share because you've got a big overlap in the city. So basically, there's only one way to do this, and I'm kind of heading into that. I've headed into that tunnel, and I'm well within it, and I'd like to emerge at the other end so we can, finalize this and get it exactly right. Let me just, for the benefit of those who weren't here last week, go over the key measures and concepts that I'm going to be talking about. There are demographic measures and there are legal concepts. The demographic measures are total population, that is all ages, citizens and non-citizens, every human being in the district of whatever age. And it's that population that has to be distributed pretty much equally among the 5 districts. So you got to have about the same number of people. The idea there is that it's people who are represented. They may be infants and children, they may be non-citizens, but they are represented by people who get elected from that district. So it's everybody. The people who get to elect the aldermen are citizens of voting age, people 18 and over who have become citizens or are born citizens. So that's a different population. It's a subset of the total population. So you want to keep those 2 concepts in mind. What matters about the citizen voting age population from a legal standpoint is whether in the process of creating this plan I have done something that has the effect of diluting the voting strength of what are known as protected minorities. In this city, those would be Hispanics and African Americans. So I want to stay away from doing anything that looks like I've diluted their vote. Now, the legal concepts here, protected group I've just mentioned, these are eligible voters who are Hispanic or black for your purposes. And minority vote dilution comes about through what's known as cracking or packing. Cracking is the only thing that could be done here. That's where you spread a group so thinly across several districts that they're not a big enough share to really matter, and so you've kind of disenfranchised them. And that's what the Voting Rights Act says you can't do. And if you do it, then you're in big trouble, and you're looking at at least $500,000, if not $1 million lawsuit, which you might win or you might lose, but either way it's going to cost a whole lot of money. So we want to stay away from that. Implementing the criteria. Now, this is my revised strategy, or I shouldn't say strategy, my revised kind of worldview of how I'm going to do this. My argument is that the message I got from the voters here is that they want historic neighborhood communities to be not only the starting point, but they regard that as of primary importance. Among the numerous traditional redistricting criteria, this is really, really important here, more so than in other cities that I've done redistricting in. So I said, okay, that's the starting point, and I have to have each alderman district have about 22,073 residents, 1/5 of the population. I have to do my best to maintain the voting strength of each minority. That would be the share of the citizen voting age population who are Hispanic and the share who are black. And in this case, I have brought out a new idea, which is, I'd like to use the word enable, because I'm not saying this causes it, but I'm saying it sets it up so it could happen that there would be racial ethnic coalitions. That is to say, there would be instances where blacks and Hispanics in either of 2 districts where blacks and Hispanics are concentrated could say, together we have 60% of the electorate here, we can elect whoever we want if we vote together. Or it could be Hispanics and non-Hispanic whites, or it could be blacks and non-Hispanic whites. But there are more ways in which a candidate can appeal to the electorate by saying, I'm taking into account things that matter to you in this district, and it affects all of you. So you want to go for me, and all I need is to have enough votes from a combination of groups. So I like the idea of enabling coalitions. And then after all that's done, I can talk about balancing other traditional redistricting or districting criteria, such as trying to follow the lines of House districts, which is maybe possible, but there aren't too many opportunities to do that. And the message I got at the last meeting was, whatever those criteria are, at the very end of that list is incumbency. So I haven't even looked at incumbency yet, and if there's an opportunity to switch a block one way or another, I could take that into account. But that's the least important thing from what I heard at the last meeting. So we're going to start with neighborhood communities, and I want you to understand what my concept of your neighborhoods are. This is just a reference map. It shows the 2011 House districts that encompass or that cover the city of Waterbury. And it's my understanding that these House districts are kind of macro neighborhoods. I mean, these are areas where people feel a common tie to each other, and it's a function of the history of their being represented by, in a sense, someone who represents their district. So it's kind of their neighborhood. So that's one thing that I sort of care about. But the thing I really care about is what you see here, which is the neighborhoods that you have defined on the map. And you'll see on the reason we got the big blow-up maps and the 11 by 14, the larger maps that have been handed out, if you take your glasses off and put a magnifying glass on, you see little tiny dotted lines that correspond to these neighborhoods. So what I've done is I've looked at these and I've said, well, where can I go to make whole neighborhoods part of districts such that I'm moving in the right direction in terms of concentrating rather than diluting the votes of each minority's citizen voting age population. So as I looked at this, I also wanted to say that at last week's meeting there were several people in addition to Mr. Butler who submitted plans, and I took a look at the plan that was submitted by Brian Baker and Rachel Guest. I don't know if these people are in the audience or not, but Rachel Guest submitted 3 plans, and there's a lot of work that goes into these things. I mean, these are not people who just sat down, after a beer and said, well, let me show you how I want to draw this plan. It takes a couple hours to do this the right way. And then Larry Butler had his plan. So I wanted to acknowledge all of the map makers, the amateur map makers, who did a good job. I can tell that they're having fun at it, and I can tell that they did it late at night because that's the only time you have time to do it, when it's fun. But the important point was that all of these maps they exhibited fundamental similarities. They were all speaking to the same issue, that they wanted to keep neighborhoods intact. And they did it in different ways, but I would say to Mr. Baker and to Ms. Guest that if you look at your maps, you'll see that they're of the same pedigree here, of the map that I'm going to show you. They accomplish the same thing in slightly different ways. So I'm going to show you Mr. Butler's map. And this is the map as I received it. It looks real simple, and it is real simple. The only thing is I have to figure out where those street boundaries are, so that's a lot of work. We have to digitize that and put it together. If you compare it with the map of the 2011 House district boundaries, you'll see there is a fundamental similarity. What Mr. Butler did, he explained to me, he said, I started with the 2011 districts, and I started putting territory from districts that had too many people into districts that had not enough people, and I came up with, he actually did an amazing job. He got it to be very, very close in terms of equalizing the populations. And that was, to me, one strong point of the map. But it had 2 limitations that I wanted to improve on. And this is my draft proposal number 2. It's gone under several names. The final name that was assigned to it was just this afternoon, after I said, you can now call that a proposal, not just a, thing I've been playing around with where I haven't checked the numbers yet. So this is what you're looking at, and I'm just going to go back and forth so you can look at the colors here and the colors here. I'll do it a couple times, and you can see they have the same, as I say, the same sort of pedigree. They've been built off of the concept of house districts, but they've been adjusted. And in my case, what I've done is I've taken the concept that Mr. Butler had and the others had, which was to take the green and the yellow and turn them into, you can't see the colors quite as clearly here, but it's the yellow and the northeast color, whatever you want to call that on the screen, into two districts that, in this plan, eke out a little more voting strength for each of the groups. And that was what I did. So let me show you some of the detail here, because it's hard to see on the map, but I want to point out, just kind of walk you around. I don't even know if you can see it on the screen here, but you can see those little red dots, and you'll see that the boundaries pretty much line up with the neighborhoods on the southwest. Here's the boundary in the north. If you look at that, if you look on the, I guess it's the lighter shade one on the right, and you see that red line going north-south at the top, and on the left you've got some of that lighter color in the brown area. This is what happens when you overlay census geography on your concepts of neighborhoods. That big piece of land that you see to the west of the red line on the, going north-south is a park. The Census Bureau says, we're going to call that park a census block, and we're going to combine it with something that's on the right of the red line. So I've left that uncolored. I've left that as a sore thumb, because we need to decide, well, is it really true that you want the park to be on the right? And we can just do that with a flip of a switch. So you'll see some anomalies. The other thing you'll see that yellow spike, that spear coming up on the bottom there? And I looked at that, and what's that doing there? Well, that is the Census Bureau's designation of a, quote, census block that corresponds to the railroad tracks. So that obviously would not belong in the brown district by any of your logic. So I'll have to take that block and say, well, it needs to go down into the yellow area. So these are all little fine-tuning things that I need to do in terms of finalizing this. Going around to the southeast, you can see again how, if you just look at the boundary between the yellow on the left and the one on the right, you see how those little red dots kind of correspond to that pretty well. That's where we've got those neighborhoods lined up. So that's a quick walk along the edge of the boundaries. And I want to show you now what the numbers look like, the demographic parameters, because these are really the ones that the Justice Department or any plaintiff would look at. And I've highlighted the two important things here. First of all, Mr. Butler's original proposed plan, this is just the way he gave it to me, comes out with an amazingly low deviation from ideal, and that is if you take the district that is overpopulated to the maximum degree, which is, if you look at the top, that would be the one that says 1.15% too many people. It's got a little over 1% too many souls in that district. And then if you go down to the one that says 0.98, it's got only 21,856, where it should have 22,073. You add those two numbers together, the 1.15 and the 0.98, ignore the sign, and you come up with 2.13. And you remember I told you last week that 2.13, that's the number you want to keep below 10, so you're in great shape. This would be considered a masterful job by the computer-aided hand of an elected official who knew what he was doing, knew how to get that right. Now, when I talked to Mr. Butler, he said, he was very excited because he said, and the Hispanics are 50% and the blacks are 36%. And the only problem is he was using one set of census data, which are the obvious ones you'd think of using. But the problem is that in this round of doing things in 2010, you have to work with another source of data called the American Community Survey, which gives you voting age citizens. And the true parameters for Mr. Butler's plan are, in the case of Hispanics, 45.8% Hispanic in District 5 and 30.0% black in District 2. Now, I know from my analysis, looking at the hypothetical upper limits, that it's mathematically possible to get that 45.8 up to 50, I think it was 50.8, something like that, which is a majority, and that's a very important bright line test. 50.0 is where you are, it's kind of a safe haven from the Voting Rights Act and any potential plaintiff. The 30.0 is a bit below what could be attained as an upper limit. I recall it was somewhere around 35, 36. So my message to you is you can go with Mr. Butler's original proposed plan, but I would argue that I've made a better version of it, and I'll show you why. This is my plan, and you'll notice that at the cost of a higher deviation from ideal, but this is the flexibility that I'm allowed to make use of by the Voting Rights Act, I'm able to boost those shares to 46.2 and 31.0. So let me just go back to the other one. Remember, we had, it's 46.2 and 31.0, which is above 45.8 and 30.0. So it's not a big improvement, but for me, I have established a record here tonight of saying I made an effort to boost it, and I did. And I'm telling you tonight that that's about as much as I can get it up without sort of slashing and burning, you know, the territory of one or another group. There's no way to accommodate the need to increase the shares of each of these groups without it being a zero-sum game. So I'm recommending that we live with a 6.63% total deviation. I state for the record that 46.2 and 31.0 is my best effort to increase the shares of minorities without engaging in another unlawful activity, which would be to give predominant emphasis to race to the exclusion of any other considerations. That is to say, to subordinate everything else you told me, including neighborhoods. To say, you're going to have to scrap neighborhoods, I've got to get that up to 50%. The answer is, I'm not allowed to really do that. And I think this is the best that can be accomplished. And the interesting thing about this is, in doing this, I didn't have to backslide on the neighborhoods. In fact, I did it by cleaning up some of the split neighborhoods that Mr. Butler inadvertently had created, because he wasn't looking at neighborhoods. He was just trying to put it together and say, this is a good starting point. Well, he gave me the starting point, and the other plans kind of echoed the same themes, and so this is what we've got. A plan that I think accomplishes what you want, and it has demographic parameters that I feel very comfortable defending if there were a lawsuit, and saying, I'm the guy who did this. I can stand up in court and I can testify this is why I did it, and this is how it corresponds to the law. And there's nothing you can say about this plan that would suggest that I had any intent other than conforming with the law and fulfilling the mandates of the law, which is to balance the various redistricting criteria while staying within the more strictly imposed limits of the Voting Rights Act as to protected minorities. So the minorities have been protected. The voice of the people has been expressed in neighborhoods. The incumbents, I wish you well. And so I've got those three things checked off here. And now I want to talk about enabling racial and ethnic coalitions, because I think this is, in my mind, a strong argument for an additional layer of argument for what I did. And then I can say I balance the other traditional redistricting criteria, which I will do in finalizing this, which won't really change hardly anything. I did a little bit of research, and remember, I'm the man from Mars. You know, I descended here. I know nothing about how your system works. I know nothing of your electoral history. And it turns out that since 2004, Waterbury's voters citywide have established a record that is very positive for what this plan does. And I would ask you to just engage in a little mind experiment. Let's imagine that the city of Waterbury itself was an aldermanic district of its own. It's the place where the people go to vote. And remember, it's got a much lower percentage of Hispanics citywide and a much lower percentage of blacks citywide than the two districts that we've created here. And in this imaginary aldermanic district that is the city of Waterbury itself, it is the case that you have elected, the voters here have elected 4 black aldermen. They've elected at least 1 Hispanic alderman, and I think they've elected more, but I can't tell for sure. I only know there are some more who have Spanish surnames, but it may be that those were names acquired by marriage. And most recently, in the November 2014 election, this is a, quote, aldermanic district, imaginary aldermanic district that has re-elected a black and re-elected an Hispanic to 2 state house seats in Waterbury that happen to correspond to the 2 districts that we have here. They are sort of the same geography. So if a plaintiff were to come in here and say, well, the Voting Rights Act says that if minorities are regularly defeated by block voting, blacks are defeated by block voting by non-blacks, and Hispanics are defeated by block voting of non-Hispanic whites, I'd say, how do you reconcile that claim with the fact that this whole city's been electing blacks and Hispanics? And now what I've done is I've created a plan that concentrates the votes of Hispanics in one place, concentrates the votes of blacks in another place, and in both those places, 2 out of 5 districts, blacks and Hispanics together, if you add up the numbers, are about 3/5 of the electorate. So where do you come off saying that people don't get elected in this city and can't get elected? Because surely if they can get elected citywide, they have an even better chance of getting elected in any one of these districts. So I'm getting a little carried away here because I'm beginning to testify against the imaginary plaintiff, but that's really the sweet spot that you're in. So my claim succinctly would be, if coalition voting does occur citywide, and if there's anybody here who wants to stand up and say, no, it doesn't, you better speak now. If it does occur citywide, it can occur where most voters in a district are Hispanic or black. And I think that's basically the end of the story. And you can tell the plaintiff to just kind of go away. That's my, I'm putting on my semi-lawyer hat, but Mr. Casagrande, do you have any comments on that, Dan, or have I got that basically right? All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So where we stand now, and I'd like to know if you like this direction that I've gone, is we have draft proposal number 2, and there are some kind of cleanup things I have to do on the census geography. And if you want to point to the map and tell me, you know, there are still some neighborhoods that are split, and here's one in particular that is really important to us, and I'd like you to try to unify that neighborhood, I could say, well, we could probably do that, but it might knock down the share of one or another minority by 1/10 of a percentage point, and if you want to go there, you know, 1/10 of a percentage point isn't going to matter. I could also try to follow the House state district boundaries where possible per Connecticut state law. I'm going to take a look at the map and see if that's possible, but I'm not going to do that if it disrupts any of the other things that are going on here. And then I can try to favor geographic compactness, which is really, that's a kind of a code word for saying I want to clean up the census geography so you don't see that spear heading north on the map, say what's that doing, or the little block of territory where there's a cul-de-sac with 5 homes that really should belong in the other district. It just, the way you've drawn it splits a piece of census geography, and I can't do it. So that's where we stand, and I would suggest that you give me your public input, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to come back next week and say I've got this thing cleaned up, I've incorporated whatever additional comments I've received tonight, and I've got a plan where I can say this is the official for the record plan that you can look at and say if you want to recommend it, go ahead and recommend it. And that's basically what I have to say. You'll find in the back of the handout, I want to just walk you through backup slides I brought, and I don't want to go into these unless you want me to, but I wanted to just show you places where I need to clean things up. So if you see anything like what's circled, you see that little piece of blue in the center where it looks like I've split something? That'll go away too. These are really they're phantom problems that really are not problems. But I have to clean up the map. Here's another one where that doesn't look right. I'll clean that up too. And what that's going to do is it's going to have the effect of moving 10 or 15 people from one district to another. It's not going to affect my parameters at all. I'm still in the comfort zone. So having said that, I wanted to close by basically giving a big round of thanks to a couple of people who have worked day and night on this with me, who are your dedicated city staff. A big thanks to David Vout, who is your technical GIS person. He's the guy who actually did these beautiful maps. And I don't know if you have any appreciation for how much work goes in. He has to start with a little red thing and draw that stuff, and then he gets the green pencil and he draws hundreds of hours of work to draw one of those maps. It actually has a button he pushes that does it. And he's the one who designed these maps. There's a lot of design work that went into it. And other people who really made this happen on a schedule that I think we all disbelieved when we started out. Linda Waby, your corporation counsel, who I think has coordinated this as best as one can under the circumstances with a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And also Dan Arapino and Bruce Watts. These are the folks who, when I said you need to get a website up, they got it up in about 24 hours, and they said, tell me what you want to put on it, which was a new record for me. And all of this is part of establishing the record that you all as a city have had a really impressive record of public outreach. You've engaged the public. You've told them to submit electronically what questions they had if they didn't have the time to show up at a meeting. You've shown them the maps, and they've voiced their opinions at the mic, and I believe that I've taken them into account. So I wanted to close with that note of thanks, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I think our questions will be coming after the public comment.
All
Attorney Casagrande, thank you very much, Dr. Morrison. Did you want to say something? Did I get the message right? Did you want to say something else, or are you all set? Okay. The next agenda item is public comment and input, and our Sheriff Steve has got the list.
First speaker tonight from 41 Pilgrim Ave, Jimmy Griffin.
Members of the commission, let me put my pants up here. President and Chairman of the board, and I was fascinated with the first map, as I said originally, and it did sort of hit my eye, the first two districts, and now I see a deviation that I expected with the drawing of the lines, but the way the lines are drawn and the concept of coalition. First, let me also dispel some myths. The Waterbury Coalition for Better Government that was originated out of the NAACP back in 1995 came forth with the same concept that was just put on the table, basically. And basically we'll be in total agreement with the fact that if coalitions were established in those two districts, that we could get much higher voting strength. And I would agree that that's a very positive move, because one of the things that we've been looking at is Black and Latino voting strength in separate districts, basically. If you compile those two districts together, I think that we would get sufficient strength. I really support the plan that was just presented by the demographic person. And I think that we should really think very seriously about the points that he made concerning the Voting Rights Act. Any of you seen Salma yet? Has anyone seen it on this commission? I'd advise those of you on the commission to go see Salma. Also, to understand that this is also the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act that was signed back in 1965. And Waterbury, Connecticut, as far as the at-large system, I sort of disagree with the analogy of how many aldermen were elected, because we've never had more than one alderman out of 15 from the black community or the Latino community. I explained that last week, so there's no way in the world that that would stand up in a voting rights case if it was an at-large system, if we were arguing that. So that was incorrect. Secondly, Mr. Woods and Mr. Rodriguez, with all due respect to both of them, are not spokespeople for either the NAACP or, I think, the Latino communities. I don't know where you got those names from to meet with concerning this issue. And also, there were other people that were involved in this issue many, many years that did not receive any correspondence or any discussion concerning this whole district proposal. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm available for the next week if you want to talk to me about this, because this was originally a plan that I set forth back in 1995, and I really appreciate us debating it at this particular time. And I just hope that this commission understands that the Voting Rights Act was put there to deal with these kinds of situations. And in Waterbury, Connecticut, we've gotten to the point right now where we can make some serious history and show some serious compassion for voters that have been disenfranchised for as long as I can remember in Waterbury, Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Mr. Chairman, is from 46 Hinsdale, Joy Brown.
Good evening. I'm a member of the Bully Manor Neighborhood Association, and I'm one of the officers, and I'm here with two other officers this evening. And when we came this evening, we looked at the map. One of the things that we were really struck by is the fact that the East End is being broken. You were saying you wanted to keep neighborhoods intact. Yes, Bully Manor is a small part. We're 250 households, but we are a part of the East End. And according to this new division, we are going to be split. We're going to be disenfranchised from the East End completely. That includes Hamilton Park, which is, when you think of Hamilton Park, that's the East End. It's not downtown. We're being grouped with downtown. So from Hamilton Park and Bully Manor over, we're being put with downtown, not kept with the East End, which we really should be. We work hard, and I don't feel that if we were grouped with the downtown group, Hamilton Park and Bully Manor will not be represented properly, because everybody's going to be focusing on what has to be done downtown. I respect that. But the East End is going to lose two big parts of what it really should be. And I just wanted to voice that and express my concern for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Mr. Chairman, is from 70 Blackman Road, State Representative Larry Butler.
Good evening. My name is Larry Butler from 70 Blackman Road, and I'm the state representative from the 72nd District. And I have submitted a plan that has garnered a lot of attention here. From the last meeting, was actually accepted as the baseline as from where Dr. Morrison should start and come up with a second draft plan. I'd like to commend you on the fact that this second draft plan makes the first one pale in comparison. It's a lot better than the first one. I'll give you that. Also, I just want to remind everyone about how I arrived at my plan. I took a simplistic approach, just bringing the 71st district back and then looking at the numbers that all the other districts had to give up to meet the requirements of having 5 equal districts, closely following the state representative districts. Now, in the state representative districts, is every neighborhood whole? No. No. There's a couple neighborhoods that don't really fit in the boundaries, okay? But by and large, most of them do. No one said that the whole exercise was going to wind up in perfection, and even now, it's not really perfection. I have a couple issues with it, but first of all, talk about my map and my approach. My approach, I took that simplistic approach because I thought that the lines could be drawn in such a way to have the least amount of impact to the city at large. Let's just tweak this map and have people who were formerly in the 71st district, let's put them back. They're familiar with it. These are neighbors, and in my map, the people, by and large, in those districts, in the 71st district, those neighborhoods are similar. You couldn't tell me that in that map that anyone that's in the 71st district couldn't relate to the 71st district. They're similar neighborhoods, just like all the other districts. So that was my approach. All the neighborhoods weren't whole, but most of them were. So Dr. Morrison seemed to fix a couple of neighborhoods. I'd say that that could be true, but in doing so, you also kind of undone a couple other things. As was pointed out by a member of the East End, how the East End has been, parts of the East End has been put into the 5th district. And, you know, really it's been pointed out that their interests are different. So, and you want to have aldermen who have districts that they represent with the same or similar interests too. So the point was well made. I'd have to say, well, this new draft is decent. It still has, you know, certain areas that could be improved upon, but it's up to the members of the panel to decide what approach they want to take. I would say that I still like my plan. Okay? Now I'll tell you why. As Dr. Morrison pointed out, the deviation from ideal, his number was 6.6%. My deviation, being the amateur that I am, is 2.1%. My numbers in the voter eligibility population for the minority communities that he's concerned with is 30% for the African American community and 45.8%. His numbers are 31% from the black community and 46.2% for the Hispanic. Now, I'd just like to tell you, for an amateur who actually came up with this, my plan, my numbers, my approach, I achieved it all in about 2 hours. You know, if I had a whole week, imagine what I could do. Just to put it in perspective, okay? And to have a whole week have a whole week, and you improved upon my African American percentage by 1 whole percent, and you improved on my Hispanic representation number by 0.4% in a week. Well, maybe I ought to become a professional. Anyways, and again, I shared with you the approach that I took to this because I wanted 5 equal districts that worked. But I want you to know that I didn't take the approach of how can I concentrate more African Americans in one district, because our districts already work, okay? Now, if we wanted to concentrate more African Americans in one district, should have came and talked to an elected African American official. And I certainly could have told you how to get more African Americans in a district here, but I really didn't feel that was necessary, okay? If you wanted to get more Hispanics in a district, I could have told you how to do that too. I work with Hispanics all my life, and I could have told you how to achieve that as well. And your example of how, if we can imagine the city of Waterbury as a district as a whole, and then talk about the numbers that were elected over that time frame, is just that, just a dream, just a vision, because you can't really do that. Because the reality of Waterbury in the political scene is we achieve those numbers because the parties come up with their tickets, and on their tickets, they try to reach balance. They have African Americans, and they have Hispanics, and they have certain ethnic groups. They try to get people from different neighborhoods to make up their tickets. And the reason that we have achieved those minorities getting elected is because we've had strong mayors, like our current mayor, Neil O'Leary. When he's pretty popular, he got elected, and guess what? Everybody rides the coattails. Not just minorities, it just happens, but they will. That's where those numbers come from. So let's not be in any illusion of those numbers were achieved by any other reason but except for the political dynamic in our city politics, okay? So just dismiss that, okay? That is irrelevant. So just to keep it real, I think that I'd like to see the lines that I put in place with street boundaries be accepted. If you got to tweak it a little bit. Obviously, my numbers that I use, and I didn't have the luxury of having the extra set of numbers that Dr. Morrison had. If I had those, boy, imagine what I could have done. But again, and I would tell you that I've made my presentation. I hope you're second. But I have to respectfully tell you that for the rest of this endeavor, I'm not coming back here. I'm not coming back here, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay? Anyone on the panel could call me if you want some input, but if the result of me coming here and speaking out and trying to do right by the city of Waterbury is that almost every possible boundary in the 72nd district had some change in it, you know, we're supposed to be trying to make the 71st district whole and make simple approaches to all the rest. But almost every boundary in the 72nd district was changed. So you know what, I had my say, and I'm not going to come back anymore, because if I have some more to say, or some strong words, or some strong criticism, no telling how the 72nd district may be changed as a result of that. So, and I could tell you, this map, one of the things that hasn't been taken under consideration is polling places. By having this many changes on this map, just think of where all these people are going to vote. My approach was to minimize it so only a few people would have to change the polling places they would have to vote. With this new draft plan, if you talk to the register of voters, I submit to you, there's going to be a lot of people on off years are going to be voting in polling places that they don't normally vote on. Why put the whole city through going through a lot of different polling places to vote at when we could minimize that? So thank you very much. And I'm seriously considering getting into the line drawing business and demographic because I'm telling you, if I could achieve what I did in less than 2 hours, imagine if I bought some software, got the right software, and had a little time to apply to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
Next speaker from 432 Como Avenue, Vincent Martoli.
Thank you. Vincent E. Martinelli, 432 Como Avenue. I am here on behalf of the Waterbury Neighborhood Council as the president of the council. And somebody had advised me, because I'm new as the president, that I should come up with something in writing. I'm not very good at that. They don't know me very well. I speak in front of crowds, no problem, so I may stumble more now. But the Alderman by District plan is something that the Waterbury Neighborhood Council and its members and their members, along with other organizations and individuals throughout the city, have been fighting to achieve for over 20 years. The proposed purpose of the districts is to allow the residents to have a stronger, more relevant voice in their communities and to our government. And as we draw these district lines in the sands of our great brass city, it's vital that we do so with great care. No plan can be perfect, but it's our job as community leaders, elected officials, and trusted neighbors to create the best possible districts. These districts must not alienate any segment of our population nor any group of voters. And most importantly, though, is that the indivisible lines, divisions on our maps do not create actual divisions or tensions or segregations or negative implications within or to our society, nor to the precious and many cultures upon which the heritage of Waterbury has grown. Our people are a strong and tolerant bunch, but they are evolving to become more interested, interactive, vested, and vocal in their beloved neighborhoods. Mistakes in judgment have been overlooked in the past, but now they will be looked over and under the proverbial microscope and with a fine-tooth comb. So our leaders will be scrutinized and they will be held accountable more so than ever. And if we do the best possible job we can at the district layouts, then Waterbury will enjoy great benefit from this truly historic endeavor. These district lines must not cater to or be influenced by any current or future potential elected official, nor their geographic location of residence. We have before us a task of great value, and we must exercise extreme care and caution in the development of new governing system. The Waterbury Neighborhood Council has great trust in the deciding individuals and faith in our system of government, and our members fully know and expect that the responsibility of serving the greater good of the people is one which is taken very seriously. Waterbury is and has been a great city forever. Together we will continue our legacy, a legacy of hope and ambition, compassion and success, challenges and setbacks, neighbors and friends. So please, everybody here in this room, everybody who's involved, first, you can come to the council if you have anything that you'd like to know about maybe where the boundaries of the neighborhoods are or what that culture actually feels like in real life. Maybe you're not so familiar. You can also go to the individuals in those groups, and I'd be happy to provide that contact information for you. Most importantly, though, I'd like to thank everybody in the city who's getting involved in this process. It is our government, it's our city, it's our neighborhood. We are really just nothing more than a great big family, so I appreciate everybody's help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next speaker from 214 Scott Road, Pat Gooden.
Good evening. For the record, Pat Gooden, 214 Scott Road. I am also the Vice President of the East End Community Club, and in the spirit of full disclosure, I must tell you that I'm also the campaign treasurer for Representative Salim Noujaim. I'm not here representing those organizations. I merely share that information so that you understand that I'm fully vested in my neighborhood. I looked at the map briefly because it only came out this afternoon, and naturally I focused on the east end of Waterbury, and I'm glad representatives from the Bully Manor Association spoke because that was one of the first things I noticed, that Bully Manor was not part of that East End district. Well, Bully Manor is part of the East End. And looking at the map, And again, I'm really not concerned with the rest of the city. I didn't have time to look at that, so I can't address any of the other neighborhood situations. But as far as the East End is concerned, if you take Route 69 from the Prospect line to the Woolkett line and use that as your divider, as your boundary for that 4th district, that would keep all the East End neighborhoods together, which this current map does not do. There's Bully Manor, and there's another neighborhood on the other side of Manor Avenue that is also part of that upper district, when they should in fact be part of the East End. That's all I had to say. Thank you for listening. Have a good evening.
Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker from 1844 East Main Street, Reverend Pamela Hughes.
Good evening, Reverend Pamela Hughes, 1844 East Main Street. I also would just like to put this in here that I'm also vying for the presidency of the Greater Waterbury NAACP. I want to say that I want to remind everybody, I'm listening to people, and I just want to remind everybody why we wanted aldermen by district. We wanted aldermen by district because we wanted more representation. There were different areas in the city that looked very different than other areas of the city. So that's why we wanted representation. We wanted to give people opportunities to run for an elected office. We wanted fresh people. We wanted new minds, new blood, and to give people what it is that they needed and what we needed in the city and what we still need. What I am hearing is we're creating some things that I thought we were not going to do, which is, remember, this is why we wanted aldermen by district. And now I hear people saying, well, we're not going to have this and this person, our neighborhoods are going to be divided and all of this. When if I can remember correctly, that all of the aldermen, no matter where they come from, are supposed to be representing the entire city of Waterbury. And so I think that we create things that we do not need to create. Yes, it's good to be able to have aldermen who, I've stood up here many times and complained about the Martin Luther King Park and what it looks like and all of that kind of stuff. Yes, that's good to have people in those neighborhoods who actually live there, who can come and talk to their constituents about the problems that are in this city. But let us not get it twisted. Every alderman that is elected is supposed to represent the entire city. So let's not create a problem that we do not need to create. This is about drawing the lines and making sure that people have an opportunity to run for office that have never had an opportunity before. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker from 11 Steuben Street, Alderman Lawrence Vitapillo.
Good evening, Lawrence DePillo from 11 Steuben Street. It's a bit difficult to talk about the various district lines because we just tonight had an opportunity to see the map. I assume it's going to go up on the city's website and we'll have an opportunity to digest it a little better. I commend Representative Butler and Mr. Morrison both for trying to make something that's workable around the neighborhoods. I think it's interesting that he did not take incumbency into account because the citizens of Waterbury in the last election voted to change their form of government. And I'd like to repeat once again that there are no incumbents because this is no longer a citywide election of aldermen. It is an alderman by district proposal, and therefore those in aldermen, including myself, that are sitting in office today are not incumbents since Waterbury has chosen to change its form of representative government. So I hope it's not any factor in any map that's drawn because it should not be. As far as the districts, I agree with other speakers. This is going to be a very confusing time. because people are used to living in and voting in a 73rd or a 72nd or a 74th or 75th. Now it's going to be, hopefully, we're going to drop to 7, and it's going to be the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth districts. So we're going to drop the whole 70th from that. That makes it a little bit easier for people. But again, one of the things I hope this commission takes a look at and hopefully draws upon the experience at a registrar voters office is where are the polling places in the city of Waterbury? Where are they currently? Where potentially may polling places be once these districts are shifted to some degree? And I think the one thing that we want to avoid is ending up with a polling place ending up in 2 districts, so that somebody walking into a polling place has to now decide whether they're part of the first or the third or the second or the fifth. So I think it's important that this commission draw upon the experience of the registrar's office to try and keep as many districts and their polling places as one and the same. I hear the speakers about what potentially is going on in Bully Manor and other parts of the 74th district, and it is going to be confusing for people who, for their lifetimes, have voted in what is the 74th district and will move back to that district as a representative vote to find themselves in a 5th or a 3rd district, and that should be a consideration. There's no question that everyone in the top lot and some parts of what is now Robinwood and other areas remember that they were part of the 71st district. They were part of the 71st district up until 2000, when the census brought Middlebury into play and actually expanded the other districts in the city and shrunk the 71st down because Middlebury was now involved. If you go back to the booklets in the registrar's office, I believe they have some from 92, up until 1999, all 5 representative districts were within the boundaries of the city of Waterbury. There was no 71st district that included Middlebury. So I agree with Larry Butler to the fact that for those people in the 71st, being the first district, this should not be a major shift for them, because 10 years ago, they would be voting in exactly the same district that they will end up voting in Alderman by district. So I think there's obviously been new construction. There is a new census in 2010. There are other factors that have to be taken into account, and naturally there will be some shifting. But I do believe it should be, at least hopefully this commission will make that shifting as minimal as possible, because until people get used to this Alderman by district, it's going to be very confusing for them. And thank you so very much for all your considerations in this process.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Ruby Collado, 23 Elizabeth Street.
Hi, good night, everybody. My name is Ruby Collado, and I work in the school system. And I want to let you know that I hope that we can come together to do this the best we can. We have 80,000 students. We have children, we have youth. I represent them, I talk to them, to the parents every day. You see, it's easy to see this map over here. It's easy to put a percent over here. But let's not forget that there are human beings in there. We hear, and I pray that we elect the right people so we can have safe environments, educations, and futures for all those children. I talk to them and I see them every day. I can't go home and kiss my son a goodnight kiss. And I expect that every child deserves the same thing. We have all a social responsibility to make it better for them. And as I see, there are our future leaders. We're getting older. Who's going to be sitting in there is in our hand. Who's going to be the next aldermen, the next lawyers, is in our hand. We have to do this the best we can for them, because in 10 or 20 years, they're going to be the one who's going to manage all of us, our money, health care. They're going to be looking at us as an order. It depends on us if they're going to be fair. You have to be fair to them now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next speaker from 250 Wood Street, James Monroe.
Good evening, Chairman, all commissioners. My name is James Monroe. I live at 250 Wood Street, and I would also like to take the time to thank everybody that came out and participated tonight and showed interest in this Alderman by District thing. This has been a thing that's been going on for years and years, and when the voters spoke, it's up to you to implement the best plan for them. I personally am not here tonight to announce my candidates for the NAACP because this is not the place. It's a membership organization, and those that are not members, I do not insult you, but you cannot vote for me. The only thing you can do is pray for me, and I'd appreciate that. In saying also, I am here to support Larry Butler's plan 1,000%. He put a lot of time and effort into it. It can be tweaked a little, but I think it's the best plan, and it shows a lot of character coming from him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker from 107 Citizens Avenue, Ruben Rodriguez.
My name is Ruben Rodriguez, 107 Citizens Avenue, Chairman of the Latino National Republican Coalition of Connecticut. And I just want to say today that this map looks better, much better than it looked the first time. And we got to understand something. The gentleman is doing his job. He's doing his best job. And he has to follow the laws. And that's one thing that we got to look into. We understand that Alderman by District was going to be new, and that's why the people of Waterbury elected it. They knew that they needed some new people to be in those seats that you guys are sitting right now. And one thing that we understand, at least this map looks much better, and I gotta admit that he's doing his job. It's a little bit similar to what Butler has. Butler has done a great job telling them how to do it from the first time. But the Latino community, we are all over Waterbury. So we cannot even, and first of all, in God's eyes, we're all the same. So no matter what, we all got to represent, if you're white, black, Hispanic, or any color, you got to represent that community as best as you can. So that's why I gotta say that this map is much better, and I give him the respect that the guy is doing his job at this moment. So, you know, we gotta start from the beginning. We gotta start from one part of the city, and he did his job. And one thing that, you know, the 72nd district is cut off in 3 or 4 parts. That's something that I don't appreciate too much, but you know, he has to do his job. He has to put how many people that district has to be represented. We cannot we got to do a little bit of tweaking here and there. There are some neighborhoods that are going to be kind of out of the loop, but that's the only thing that could be fixable. But from other part, I think that the map is doing much better now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker from 62 Avalon Circle, Richard Wood.
It's almost time to go home. I just want to correct something. Our friend here from Nantucket had some incorrect information, probably I gave him by accident. I'm not the executive director of the NAACP. I'm on the Working Reorganization Committee and very active in it. And we have a lot of members of the NAACP here because we are interested in how this process works. And it looks like it's working. What we have seen tonight is an example how when people put their minds to something and have the information that they need to do it, they get the job done. And it's coming along pretty well. It probably needs a little bit more tweaking here and there to polish it up for a percentage point. But it looks like our friend from Nantucket, who, by the way, hosts an annual barbecue, I understand, want to keep his name and address handy. But I think we're on our way. So all I wanted to say is correct that information and say thank you. Thank you for helping us out. You can come back here, you know.
Thank you.
Next speaker from 33 Baker, Alderman Chris Orsini.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Orsini, 33 Baker. I'd have to agree with Alderman DePillo, which I don't agree with all the time, by the way. It would nice to see one more chart relative to the statistical analysis, and that would be the 2,000 boundaries. If you're telling me that the means test that we see here is slight variations between the Butler plan and Dr. Morrison's plan, then we're going to a certain extent, be in somewhat violation of the primary directive relative to the minority populations, meaning they should be at 50 and at whatever they are, 38, whatever the numbers were. So if that's truly the case, then one more chart would probably be in order. That would be the 2,000 boundary lines, and then the analysis that we see here that Dr. Morrison has completed to see whether or not that means test actually matches up with the first two. If we're in the same arena, which we pretty much are, as we see here with these two boxes, then that would be a third alternative that must be considered. It would be far more convenient for everybody living in their particular district, and it might make more sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's the last speaker tonight.
Thank you. I would like to open it up to my fellow commission members if there's any comments or questions for our, yes, Mr. Pizzuto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points of reference. Now we're at the fine-tuning point, even though my eyes are bleeding because I can't read some of these charts. But I think if we can ask the demographer, maybe we need a motion, but to even refine it more to try to preserve those few streets that might have slipped out of the neighborhood boundaries, whether it be Booley Manor or the 72nd. I think we're very, very close now. The resolution is getting much better. And speaking of resolution, I would ask that, I know you've done the yeoman's task in a terrible time constraint, but if we can get maybe 11 by 17 paper or something electronically, just to see some of the streets and things. And I know you're working in impossible constraints, but I think that if we can if you can email as well as the website, whether it's a list of the commissioners or whomever, that would be a very positive thing so that we come in better prepared. Usually we would meet beforehand or after and caucus and talk about things, but I think if we get the information, and I know you're getting it literally just out as fast as possible, but I think that if the time constraints allow, that if we can fine-tune this to a lot of the speakers' points where the polling places change at a very minimal amount, then I think we will be successful in pulling off something that's never been done before in the city. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I put that in a motion to give a directive to the demographer and Attorney Casagrande that we can have larger drawings, if it's possible, in a timely manner, and possibly be emailed to the commission in time, even at the same time it gets to the website. Sooner would be better. And if need be, we can caucus if we had to before or after, if there's certain questions that we would then be better prepared to discuss as a commission. So that would be my motion. I guess I need a second.
Do I need a second? We have a second from Bill Colo.
Yep.
The motion is carried.
Okay.
I don't know how to call it.
Sure. Oh, on the discussion? Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm new at this. I'm in the corporate world. I
Sure,
don't get
sure.
used to this.
So all those in favor?
All in favor, please, do we want to do it through a roll call? Or just aye?
Can just,
Under discussion? Okay, thank you. Anyone have a discussion point? Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm just wondering, knowing that we just got the maps this afternoon and we're talking about smoothing things out and changing things around a little, is the intent for us to sit here this evening and ask for you to shift a line one way or another, or can we email you after the fact in between meetings and ask for specific changes? Okay, for those of you that didn't hear, if you have any specific questions, we can go ahead and email them. It's a little difficult to sit here and do it tonight after just seeing the map shortly.
Right. Okay. The only thing I would ask is that, just because we have to comply with FOI, if you have any email comments, I think you should get them to the chairman, and then the chairman can get them to us. And obviously, any email comments would be put into the record as exhibits at the next meeting. Okay? So thank you. If you go through the chair, then we'll make sure that we get the comments and get them to Dr. Morrison as soon as possible.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Right. And Corporation Counsel advises me, and again, this is just a matter of prudence, it's important not to have a back and forth in an email exchange, because then the FOIC looks at that as, oh, you're having a private meeting, and that's a no-no in their eyes. So I know we're operating under terrible time constraints and you want to get comments, but I think the best thing to do would be just here is my comment, please pass, Mr. Chairman, pass the comment on to Dr. Morrison for him to address at the next meeting, rather than a back and forth between commissioners on a particular comment, if everybody understands that.
Sure.
Sure.
Any other discussion points on this issue? Shall we take a vote? Those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? The motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments amongst my other commission members? Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. For Attorney Casagrande, I know we've spoken a few times about some lingering quote-unquote questions based on the Charter Revision Report and what the citizens have voted on. I wonder if you've made any progress in the no more than two party can serve in a district and the supermajority language as well?
We've made progress on both. I didn't want to take tonight to address that. We will have our final opinion letter to you at next week's meeting on those issues. But I can tell you, at least on the provision that says that no more than two members from any political party may be elected, our initial review of the state statute supports that provision. That, in other words, and again, this is subject to final review among my staff and team, but the initial review of the statutes and the case law appears to support the ability of a local charter revision commission and local voters to adopt that kind of a change.
Any other questions, comments?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
And it's to Dr. Morrison. So the comment was made in regards to the 72nd District. So I know that we just got the maps this afternoon, didn't have a lot of time to look at those maps. Would you agree that most of the lines were moved in that district, and if so, why? Pardon?
You guys got to get up to the mic.
It is a question. Pardon?
The question is why the boundaries of the 72nd District are not being followed. I guess that's your question. I mean, why they're hardly at all being followed?
Right. So first of all, do you agree with the statement that the lines in the 72nd District have moved? Pretty much all of them.
I'd have to look at the map to say, but I'll take it on faith that the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
And if you want to know why, the answer is that there's the inevitable need to shift population around so you equalize the populations of different districts. And had I strictly followed the boundaries or even tried to adhere to the boundary in most of the places, I would have, in effect, diluted the voting strength of one or both groups. I'm not sure which one it would be, but that would be giving priority to the boundary and subordinating the point that the Voting Rights Act makes, which is we're here to prevent vote dilution. And so that's the problem. I mean, otherwise, other things equal, I would follow the boundary. But it's not possible to follow the boundary and have percentages like the ones that I have or that Mr. Butler has. That's one of the realities of doing the districting. It would be very nice if one could start with just the boundaries and say, well, it's so close, I just have to move a little bit around. But unfortunately, that's not how the data come out on the census.
Are there other options? I mean, you disrupted that district so much. Are there other options?
The other option is to expose yourself to a lawsuit. I mean, to put it bluntly, you get in it. I have to walk a fine line, and if a plaintiff knows that one could form a district in which Hispanics are a majority, and a district in which, and that's the most important point, and also a district in which blacks are something around 36%, and I say, well, what I did was instead I followed those existing political boundaries and had the effect, not the intent, but the effect of disenfranchising one or another group. That's kind of, the honeypot that a plaintiff would go for and say, you did it the wrong way. And that's, I mean, it's a trade-off. If you want to do it, you can do it, but I'm just saying that's the reason that I steer clear of that on the advice of Mr. Casagrande. I mean, it's a simple trade-off between how much do you want to venture into the danger zone of a lawsuit that you might prevail on, but it would cost you $1 million to prevail, and you might lose. I mean, that's the simple answer. I don't have a dog in this race. That's just the way it comes out. So I hope that answers your question.
I just want to add, and I know that there's a pending motion, so I think you want to try to vote on that motion, but just to follow up on what Dr. Morrison said, I don't think anything he said should be construed as an admission that if you were to say, okay, no, we want to follow the boundaries more closely than perhaps he does, that means we lose. That should be clear for the record. Our job is to minimize your exposure to a lawsuit. Because the problem with a lawsuit under the Voting Rights Act is that even if you win, you lose in terms of the amount of attorney's fees and expert fees on just the sheer amount of statistical evidence that that a city would have to mount. Is that the be-all and the end-all? No, it's not. But our job, or at least I consider my job as counsel, is to minimize your exposure to a lawsuit. And again, it's a judgment call, and I know with your asking the questions, you're wrestling with that judgment. And as Dr. Morrison has said, it is a fine line. But I think that his plan, and to use Representative Butler's oratorical flourish, which I think is very effective, you go through each of the factors, you check them off, it's done. Historical neighborhood communities as a starting point. That's a traditional districting principle. You've considered that. It's done. Each district has to have substantial equality of population within a margin of error of 10%. Representative Butler's plan is much closer to absolute equality, which is great, but the law doesn't require absolute perfection. It requires that you stay within the 10%. Dr. Morrison's plan, I think, is a 6.7% deviation. You've done that. You can check that off. It's done. Maintaining the voting strength of each minority to the extent you can without making race the predominant factor. He's done that. Enabling racial and coalitions within those two districts. He has done that. He can't, as he's explained, if he goes above 50% in the is it the second district for Hispanics or the fifth? Okay, whatever it is, in the Hispanic district, that would create a majority, but it also raises the argument that race predominated over the other factors. Whereas if you go down to whether it's Representative Butler's 46% or Dr. Morrison's a little higher than that, that together with the voting strength of the blacks, the African Americans in that district, enables a coalition vote, which the Second Circuit, which is the federal court that governs Connecticut, at least one court in that circuit has recognized is a valid way of complying with the Voting Rights Act. So you can check that off. That's done. And at the same time, you've balanced the other traditional district criteria. One of those is protection of incumbents. I think one of the last aldermen to speak, he had a very good point. In this new venue of how you're going to vote, there really are no incumbents. So which is not to say that you can't consider whether you might want to protect those incumbents at large, but the community has voiced their position on that fairly clear. So you've considered it. You've checked it off. So therefore, is there any plan that is completely invulnerable to an attack? No.
No.
And there's no guarantees in any litigation. But what I can say to you, based on my understanding of the case law and the statutes and working with Dr. Morrison, who, as many speakers have acknowledged, is one of the foremost demographic experts on the Voting Rights Act in this country, and that's why we wanted to retain him, I can tell you that what's before you comports with the Equal Protection Clause, in my view, comports with the Voting Rights Act, in my view, and is defensible. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Black, you said you had a couple more?
I just have one more question. Alderman Baker, was that correct? Orsini. He had mentioned the 2,000 boundaries. Will we be getting that to take a look at how that plays into all of this?
Yes.
I can show you a map of the boundaries themselves, but actually doing the demographic parameters, I don't think is going to be feasible given the fact that we've got to have something for you all to sort of decide you want to approve, you want to go forward with next week. There's a lot of work that goes into, there's not a whole lot of work that goes into showing you the map because we have the map, and in fact it's online. You can see where the boundaries are. Your GIS people could probably put the street layer in so you could see where the streets are, but to actually assign every census block to the old district system is a huge amount of work, and that's going to detract from the other things that need to be done in the next 7 days. And so I would say, and I can tell you offhand right now what it would look like. It would not have parameters as good as the plan that I have. I mean, that's what I know. I know it would be construed as something that is not concentrating the minorities as well. I just don't know by how much. It might be a small amount, it might be a large amount, but it would be kind of the second place choice, in my judgment, in terms of what I was trying to accomplish. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Vice Chair Pizzuto.
Mr. Chairman, while we're still under discussion, I know we have a motion pending. So based on the demographer, Dr. Morrison, our attorney Casagrande, I would ask that we come as close as we can to the constraints that we need to that are defensible in a court of law. And this way, I'm asking that we push the boundaries as close as we can, but that are defensible. And I think that's all that any of the commissioners can ask for, and the best we can do at our first bite at this anyway. So I look forward to the next map, but that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion before we go on the motion? Yeah, I'm sort of lost. Can we have a reminder of the motion?
Yeah. Okay.
We're all in information overload right about now.
Yeah, we are. Okay. It was, one was to give us the larger prints if we can, the 11 by 17, to come as close as we can to the constraints and to restore the neighborhoods as close as we can to the boundaries within the federal and state guidelines. If we need to be able to caucus either before or afterwards if the commission has questions. I don't think we do, but just to reserve that right if we need to. And I think that's it. Oh, yeah, right. Receive the documents if we can through an email process as well as the website. Yeah, in a timely manner, yeah.
Commissioner Templeton, did you have something to add?
Right, sure. Okay, in my motion, if we can as well, one of the variables in that formula is to consider the polling places as another constraint, as close as we can to preserving those. Thank you.
So we have a motion, we have a second. We can vote now. All the discussion is considered. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Any other discussion from members of the commission or anything?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm sorry. I know Dr. Morrison had just a few concluding remarks he would want to make with your permission.
As long as my fellow commissioners are all set with their questions and comments. The floor is yours, Dr. Morrison.
I'm just going to run down, what I'm going to do, because I think I can do this, all in the next 7 days, and it's going to accomplish what you want. What I'm going to do is, again, try to refine and preserve the few streets that are out of bounds, and basically take a look at the map and say, are there places where I can make these fine-tuning improvements? As I understand it, you want to have the neighborhood districts restored insofar as is possible where there are splits. And under that general heading, I've heard some, comments. 2 people have commented about the East End. And I'm going to take a look at that, and I'm going to sort through all of those comments and ask myself, can I do what's being requested here without throwing these districts not just out of balance, but really engaging in something that would be dilutive? So I'm going to sort through all of that. That's my laundry list of tweaking to do, tweaking that I can get away with doing. And also, in terms of, I think a more efficient way for you to see these maps will be for me, for us, or through you, the chair, to say, here is the map as an email attachment, and then you can bring it up on your screen and you can enlarge it and say, I'm interested in that little square inch there, and you can see where the boundary is. And we can do that. That way we don't have to print off the wall size map, which takes a half a day to get copies and people have to get. So that's a good way to proceed. And also, I'm going to take a look at the 72nd district and see, just verify what I think is the case, which is, if I can follow the boundary, it won't be very much, but I'll take a look at it and see if I can. And the new issue that came up is this issue of polling places, which, is not a consideration that I took account of, and technically I'm not obliged to take account of, but I think what we should do, given the fact that it has both an economic burden, it's a huge economic burden on the city, and it also has a burden on voter turnout because people are confused where they are. So my proposal would be to say, when all is said and done, I've done all the things I've said that are on my list of things to do, to say, here is the map I think I want to recommend, but I want to run it by the registrar, is that the right person? And say, okay, this is sort of what I have to do, but if you can see any way to economize on or simplify how you run elections, tell me where I can move just a tiny piece of territory that might have 25, 50 people in it, and I can do that. And that may be a little finger that will jut out somewhere and say, well, we don't have to mess things up here. But I'm inclined to think that this is not going to be a problem that can be greatly simplified, but I think the only person who can tell us that is the registrar. Just say, you're going to have to redo this whole thing. Tell me tell me how I can save you some trouble. And I think if I could get that feedback pretty promptly, I can then say, well, sacrifice 1/10 of a percentage point here and there because there was an economic rationale for doing it. And also I can make the argument that insofar as you don't confuse voters, you're perhaps promoting turnout, which is a good thing under the Voting Rights Act. So that's what I'm going to do, and you can check your email boxes. I guess it'll probably be sometime around maybe Wednesday or so, I'm hoping. And if there are any other questions just about the practicalities of it, I'd like to hear them now, because we're kind of at a point where I think you're going to need to look at it and say, now we're at a point where we got to make a choice and decide. And I'm assuming that you do not want me to provide you with a choice of plans. That is to say, you don't want to see Mr. Butler's plan as he presented it, but you want to see my further tweaking of my plan number 2, which is really basically based on his concept to begin with.
I think, yeah, both would be preferable.
All right. Well, his plan will be, I think his plan will basically be what it is tonight, and that'll be your choice. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, I'm definitely an information overload. Do I hear a motion to adjourn for tonight?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much and have a good weekend.